In an increasingly complex global landscape, the relationship between the United States and China remains a focal point of international diplomacy, particularly as new developments unfold. The recent inauguration of President Donald Trump has injected fresh energy into U.S. China relations, with both leaders expressing a desire to strengthen ties while acknowledging the challenges that lie ahead. In a phone call shortly after his inauguration, Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping discussed a range of issues, including trade and the controversial social media app TikTok. The backdrop to this dialogue is marked by heightened tensions surrounding trade policies. Trump has indicated a potential increase in tariffs on Chinese goods, suggesting a 10% tariff set to take effect as early as February 1. This follows a pattern established during his previous administration, where tariffs were used as a strategic tool to address trade imbalances and other grievances. In 2023, the U.S. reported its largest trade deficit with China, amounting to a staggering $279.4 billion, serving as a catalyst for Trump's renewed focus on the issue. Chinese officials have responded to these developments with a call for negotiation and cooperation. Yadong, a spokesperson for China's Ministry of Commerce, emphasized the importance of managing differences while expanding mutually beneficial cooperation. The Chinese side hopes that under the strategic guidance of the two heads of state, both sides will strengthen dialogue and communication, he stated during a press conference. This sentiment was echoed by Mao Ning, a spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, who reinforced the notion that tariffs are detrimental to both nations. We stand ready to maintain communication with the U.S., properly handle differences, and pursue a steady, sound, and sustainable development of the China-U.S. relationship, Mao remarked. As Trump navigates these diplomatic waters, his administration faces the dual challenge of addressing domestic concerns over trade and the geopolitical implications of its policies. The president's recent remarks about fentanyl trafficking from China to the U.S. highlight a critical intersection of trade and public health, suggesting that future negotiations may extend beyond traditional economic metrics to encompass broader societal impacts. While Trump's tariffs are aimed at reshaping the trade landscape, experts caution that such measures often have unintended consequences. They can lead to increased costs for consumers, prompt retaliatory tariffs from China, and ultimately fail to achieve their intended outcomes. Nevertheless, the administration appears committed to using tariffs as leverage in negotiations, a tactic that may define Trump's second term. As both nations grapple with these challenges, the path forward remains uncertain. The dialogue initiated by Trump and Xi could pave the way for a more stable relationship. But it also risks exacerbating existing tensions if not handled delicately. The international community will be closely watching to see how these developments unfold, particularly as both leaders continue to assert their national interests while seeking common ground. As negotiations progress, the impact of these policies will likely reverberate throughout the global economy, shaping the future of U.S.-China relations in the months and years to come. In a move likely to escalate tensions between the United States and China, President Donald Trump announced he is considering imposing a new 10% tariff on Chinese imports. This announcement, made on his first full day in office, underscores his administration's aggressive stance on trade and reflects ongoing concerns regarding China's role in the distribution of fentanyl, a potent opioid that has contributed to the opioid crisis in the U.S. We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China. Based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada, Trump stated during a press conference in the White House's Roosevelt Room. He indicated that February 1 is the target date for this new tariff, which is significantly lower than the 60% tax he had threatened last year. However, it aligns with his earlier pledge as president-elect to impose a 10% tariff on Chinese goods, reflecting a strategic shift as he reconsiders his approach to trade negotiations. The dialogue surrounding tariffs is not just economic, it also intersects with pressing social issues. During the same press conference, Trump recounted conversations with families affected by fentanyl overdoses, emphasizing the human toll of the drug crisis. I said to President Xi, we don't want that crap in our country. We got to stop it, he recounted, illustrating his administration's resolve to tackle the fentanyl supply chain. The implications of these tariffs could be significant. The U.S. recorded a staggering trade deficit with China of $279.4 billion in 2023, according to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. Experts warn that while tariffs may serve as a negotiating tactic, they often lead to higher prices for consumers and could provoke retaliatory measures from China, which has already expressed its disapproval. In a recent statement, Chinese embassy spokesman Lu Pingyu remarked, "There's no winner in a trade or tariff war, and we firmly uphold our national interests," signaling a readiness to respond to U.S. actions. The backdrop to this renewed trade conflict includes not only economic considerations but also geopolitical ones, especially in light of growing ties between China and Russia. Just hours after Trump's inauguration, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed their strategic relationship, a development that poses additional challenges for the U.S. as it navigates its own foreign policy objectives. The strengthening of ties between these two nations could complicate Trump's efforts to negotiate favorable terms with Beijing, particularly as he seeks to address issues beyond trade such as the ongoing war in Ukraine. As Trump moves forward with his proposed tariffs, the stakes are high. The economic landscape is shifting, and with it the dynamics of international relations. How these tariffs will ultimately affect U.S.-China relations, consumer prices, and geopolitical stability remains to be seen. Observers are watching closely, anticipating further developments as both nations grapple with the implications of their economic and diplomatic strategies in the evolving global landscape. In the complex landscape of global economics, few narratives are as compelling or contentious as that of China's economic trajectory. Recent discussions have highlighted a paradox. While China's production and exports are surging, many economists remain skeptical about the overall health of its economy. This discrepancy raises critical questions about the interpretation of economic data and the underlying assumptions that shape our understanding of China's role in the global market. A recent editorial in the Washington Post paints a bleak picture of China's economic situation, claiming that China's economy remains in the doldrums. This assertion aligns with the views of some financial analysts who argue that despite a reported 13% growth in exports, the country is merely resorting to increased output to compensate for sluggish domestic consumption. Such perspectives suggest that Chinese policymakers are stepping on the gas for exports in a desperate attempt to revive a faltering economy. Yet, this analysis may overlook a fundamental principle of economics: production inherently drives consumption. John Tamny, a contributor to Forbes, critiques this pessimistic outlook, arguing that production should be seen as a positive force rather than a sign of desperation. He posits that the global economy benefits from China's ability to produce goods at an unprecedented scale. The expansion of Chinese exports not only satisfies international demand but also enhances global productivity through the division of labor. What matters is that there's production and growing amounts of it, Tamny asserts, suggesting that increased imports allow countries including China to specialize and elevate their economic output. Tamny challenges the notion that China's economic struggles are indicative of a broader malaise. He emphasizes that the relationship between production and consumption is not linear. Robust production can stimulate demand in unexpected ways. For instance, he argues that savings generated from exports circulate back into the economy through loans and investments, thus maintaining overall demand. Bullish production is consumption always and everywhere, he states, framing the narrative around China's economic performance in a more optimistic light. This debate is not just academic, it has real-world implications for international trade and economic policy. As countries like the United States and Japan express concern over the influx of Chinese goods, they must grapple with the broader economic dynamics at play. The fear of being undercut by China's exports could lead to protectionist measures that might stifle global trade and innovation. Tamny's perspective invites policymakers to reconsider their approach, advocating for a focus on enhancing productivity rather than restricting competition. Looking ahead, The global economic landscape is likely to continue evolving as China refines its production strategies and navigates the complexities of international trade relationships. The ongoing dialogue between pessimistic economists and advocates of globalization will shape the future of economic policy not only in China but across the globe. As the world grapples with the implications of China's economic ascent, it is essential to recognize the transformative power of production and its capacity to drive growth, innovation, and ultimately prosperity for all. In a rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape, the dynamics between the United States and China are increasingly scrutinized. Recent developments, particularly under the Trump administration, signal a significant shift in policy approach towards both nations' military strategies and diplomatic relations. As the Pentagon undergoes a series of key appointments, questions arise regarding the implications for U.S. support of Ukraine and its potential effect on deterring Chinese aggression towards Taiwan. The backdrop of this transformation is marked by skepticism among new Pentagon officials about the necessity of aiding Ukraine. The appointments of figures such as Marine Corps veteran Austin Dahmer as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and John Noh, a former advisor focused on China, as Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, underscore a pivot in defense priorities. These officials, seen as protégés of Elbridge Colby, the Under-Secretary of Defense for Policy, are critical of the prevailing narrative that supports the notion that bolstering Ukraine's defense is vital in preventing Beijing from pursuing aggressive maneuvers in Taiwan. This skepticism is illustrated by a broader trend within the Trump administration, where defense strategies are increasingly isolated from European conflicts. Both Dahmer and Villescreen, who was appointed as a senior advisor, align with a perspective that questions the interconnectedness of the Ukraine situation with U.S. China relations. Their appointments suggest a recalibration of U.S. military focus, emphasizing the Indo-Pacific region as the primary theater for strategic engagement with China. Laura Zhou, a seasoned journalist covering China's diplomatic relations, highlights the significance of these shifts. She notes, with the U.S. and China vying for military supremacy in East Asia, the new appointments are likely to influence defense strategies and security relations in a manner that reflects a unilateralist approach. This change could lead to a more assertive stance from China, emboldened by perceived U.S. disengagement from European conflicts. As the Senate confirms these new appointments, the implications for global security remain uncertain. The belief that Ukraine's defense impacts Taiwan's security may diminish, potentially altering the balance of power in the region. Should this trend continue, it could embolden Beijing's ambitions, with far-reaching consequences for U.S. allies in the Asia-Pacific. Looking ahead, the Biden administration's response to these developments will be crucial. As it navigates the complexities of U.S.-China relations, the administration will need to reassess its strategy to ensure that support for Ukraine and deterrence of Chinese expansionism are not mutually exclusive. The evolving landscape suggests a period of heightened tension and recalibration as both nations position themselves amid an increasingly competitive global order. Future developments will undoubtedly be pivotal in shaping the trajectory of U.S. foreign policy and international relations in the years to come. As global tensions continue to reshape international relations, China's diplomatic maneuvers are gaining renewed attention, particularly in the context of the evolving dynamics with the United States and its allies. Following the inauguration of Donald Trump, who has adopted a more unilateralist approach, China's engagement with U.S. partners appears to be gradually improving, as evidenced by recent high-level dialogues and strategic meetings. In a noteworthy development, Chinese President Xi Jinping recently communicated with European Council President Antonio Costa, emphasizing a shared responsibility to enhance stability and certainty amid the current global turbulence. This dialogue represents more than just a routine exchange. It showcases China's strategic intent to solidify its position in Europe while navigating the complexities of U.S.-China relations. Xi's call is seen as an effort to reassure European allies of China's commitment to constructive cooperation, especially as Europe grapples with its own geopolitical challenges. The anticipated meeting between Kaja Kallas, The EU's new foreign affairs representative and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi during the Munich Security Conference next month marks another pivotal moment in this diplomatic landscape. This will be Kala's first formal engagement with China since assuming her role, indicating that Europe is keen to re-establish ties that may have weakened under previous administrations. The lack of substantive interactions since the formation of the new European Commission highlights the urgency in fostering dialogue with Beijing, particularly as the EU seeks to balance its relations with both the US and China. Meanwhile, the broader implications of these diplomatic efforts cannot be overlooked. As outlined in a recent editorial by the Global Times, 2025 is set to be a significant year for China, marking anniversaries that underscore its historical role in global governance and cooperation. The emphasis on head-of-state diplomacy by Chinese leaders is not merely symbolic, it reflects a strategic framework aimed at addressing global challenges through multilateral engagement. China's approach, characterized by its commitment to peaceful development and win-win cooperation, stands in stark contrast to the confrontational tactics often employed by major powers. The focus on mutual respect and equality in international relations is central to Xi's vision as he aims to foster stability not just within bilateral frameworks but across broader geopolitical landscapes. As the world confronts a myriad of challenges ranging from security crises to economic instability, China's proactive diplomatic strategy seeks to position it as a stabilizing force. The ongoing dialogues with the US and Europe, especially in light of Trump's return to power, suggest a possible shift in the geopolitical narrative, one that may encourage collaboration rather than conflict. Looking ahead, the upcoming meetings in Munich and other diplomatic engagements will be crucial in determining the trajectory of China's relations with the West. The outcomes of these discussions may not only redefine China's standing on the global stage but also influence the broader geopolitical balance as nations navigate the complexities of a multipolar world. As the international community watches closely, the evolution of these relationships will undoubtedly shape the future of global diplomacy and cooperation.